In 3 years, one African military leader did the impossible. He didn't just kick out France. He erased them from an entire continent, united 7 countries under his command, and now he's flying drones into territories that Western powers swore they controlled. But here's what's terrifying Western capitals right now. This isn't a desperate rebellion or a lucky coup. This is calculated, coordinated, and it's working. Ibrahim Traoré just sent a message that shattered every assumption about power in Africa. The age of Western dominance is over, and what replaces it could reshape global geopolitics forever. The drone strikes are just the beginning. What comes next will shock you. In the span of just 3 years, one man managed to do what seemed impossible. He expelled France from an entire region, united military juntas across West Africa, and turned the Sahel into a geopolitical powder keg that's forcing superpowers to completely rethink their African strategy. This isn't a story about accidental rebellion or lucky timing. This is the calculated rise of Ibrahim Traoré, and what he's building in the Sahel is nothing short of a tectonic shift in global power dynamics. And the most stunning part? The world is only beginning to wake up to what's actually happening. Let's start with what most people don't understand about the Sahel. It's not just another troubled region in Africa. It's a 5.4 million square kilometer corridor that stretches across the entire width of the continent, touching 9 countries and serving as a geopolitical battleground where Western influence, Chinese ambition, Russian strategy, and African nationalism are locked in an increasingly tense competition. For decades, France believed it owned this game. They had military bases, economic ties, and political leverage built over generations of colonial and post-colonial presence. But in just the last few years, that entire edifice began to crumble. And the man orchestrating that collapse is the 39-year-old military leader who took power in Burkina Faso through a coup, then did something far more audacious. He made himself the face of an entire continental movement. When Ibrahim Traoré first seized control in Burkina Faso in September 2021, few people outside the region paid attention. A military officer removes a president. It happens in Africa every few years, right? But Traoré wasn't just another coup leader. He was ideologically driven, charismatic, and acutely aware of both the history of colonial extraction and the modern dynamics of great power competition. Within months of taking power, he began to articulate a vision that resonated across West Africa. The Sahel would no longer be a playground for foreign powers. The region would pursue genuine sovereignty, not the false independence that comes with a foreign military base on your soil and a foreign power's money controlling your government. This message landed like a lightning strike. By 2023, Mali's military government, which was already skeptical of French presence, threw France out entirely. Not negotiated a withdrawal, threw them out. Then Burkina Faso did the same. Then Niger, in one of the most dramatic moments in recent African history, saw its military leadership overthrow the sitting president and immediately pivot toward the exact same anti-French, pro-sovereignty agenda. Suddenly, 3 of the Sahel's most strategically important states were unified under a shared vision, and they formalized it. The Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. On paper, it was a mutual defense pact. In reality, it was a declaration of independence from the post-colonial order. But here's where the story gets genuinely interesting, because military expulsions and political rhetoric are one thing. What Traoré has been doing behind the scenes is far more significant and far more threatening to the established powers. Consider the military dimension. When Traoré came to power, Burkina Faso's armed forces were fragmented, demoralized, and losing ground steadily to insurgent groups that had metastasized across the Sahel. The country was essentially under siege. Yet instead of accepting military aid with strings attached from the West, Traoré made a calculated pivot. He deepened relationships with Russia, Turkey, and China. Russia sent military advisors and, critically, started providing drone technology. Turkey supplied armed drones and military equipment. China began offering military training and infrastructure support. But this wasn't just about acquiring hardware. It was about building a coordinated military strategy across the entire AES bloc. What emerged was something the world is only now fully understanding. The AES isn't just a political alliance. It's becoming a coordinated military power with shared intelligence, shared drone operations, and shared strategic objectives. Multiple reports have documented Burkina Faso's increasingly sophisticated use of drone strikes against insurgent positions, and more controversially, against civilian targets suspected of harboring militants. But the technological leap here is staggering. From 2021 to 2024, Burkina Faso went from a military that was barely holding ground to a military conducting coordinated aerial operations. And they're not doing this alone. The AES framework allows for shared operational capabilities across the bloc. Mali has its own drone program. Niger has access to Russian military support. They're not three separate armies anymore. They're functioning as a coordinated military alliance. The implications of this shift cannot be overstated. For the first time in the modern Sahel, there's a unified military force that operates independently of Western command structures, Western surveillance, and Western weapons supply chains. This changes everything about the region's security calculus. But that's not the full story, because what's really stunning about Traoré's strategy is how comprehensive it's been. The military coordination is one pillar, but he's also orchestrating something far subtler: the systematic construction of alternative partnerships at every level of state power. Look at the diplomatic realm. Traoré has positioned himself as a voice for Pan-African nationalism and anti-imperialist sovereignty. He's done interviews where he directly challenges the legitimacy of Western presence in Africa. He's cultivated relationships with other African leaders who are themselves skeptical of Western influence. He's presented the AES not as a replacement for Western partnership, but as Africa finally saying, "No, we will decide our own fate." This messaging resonates because it's rooted in genuine post-colonial grievance, but it's also strategic. By framing the conflict as sovereignty versus imperialism rather than as a simple geopolitical competition, Traoré has managed to position himself on the side of a much larger continental narrative. The economic dimension is equally calculated. The Sahel isn't poor in resources, it's rich in them. Mali has gold. Burkina Faso has significant mineral deposits. Niger has uranium, which is strategically crucial for nuclear power. For decades, France extracted substantial economic value from these resources through colonial-era agreements and post-colonial economic leverage. Traoré's strategy includes directly challenging these arrangements. By expelling French companies and renegotiating resource extraction deals with Russia, China, and Turkey, the AES is fundamentally reshaping who captures the economic value of the Sahel's resources. This isn't just about pride or principle. It's about redirecting billions of dollars in resource wealth away from France and toward new partners. And crucially, toward building state capacity within the AES nations themselves. Here's where things get genuinely complex, though, because while Traoré's strategy has been remarkably effective at expelling Western influence, the security situation in the Sahel hasn't improved in any meaningful way. In fact, by virtually every metric, insurgent violence has gotten worse. The number of deaths from jihadist and ethnic violence has actually increased substantially since 2021. The displacement crisis is worse. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating. And while Traoré can point to specific military successes, certain drone strikes, certain territory retaken, the overall trajectory is one of deepening violence and instability. This creates a fascinating paradox that sits at the heart of understanding the Sahel today. Traoré's military strategy has made him genuinely popular domestically because he's presenting resistance to Western imperialism as a core part of his identity. But that same strategy, the aggressive drone operations, the heavy-handed military tactics, the integration with Russian interests, may actually be deepening the conditions that fuel insurgent recruitment and violence. Young men join extremist groups for multiple reasons: religious ideology, certainly, but also economic desperation, a sense of marginalization, and anger at what they perceive as foreign interference and domination. When Traoré presents the conflict as one of sovereignty and anti-imperialism, he's inadvertently validating the exact framing that extremist groups use to justify their violence. The irony is stark. In fighting to expel one form of foreign presence, the AES may be creating the conditions for another form of foreign presence to deepen: Russian influence, Chinese investment, Turkish military engagement. But let's talk about Nigeria, because here's where the geopolitical consequences of Traoré's strategy become truly visible. Nigeria is West Africa's largest economy, its most populous country, and its regional hegemon. For decades, Nigeria and France have had an informal understanding. France dominates the Sahel. Nigeria dominates the coastal regions and serves as the economic engine of West Africa. But as the AES has solidified and expanded its power, Nigeria has watched with increasing alarm. Why? Because Nigeria has its own security crisis. Boko Haram and ISIS-aligned groups have been operating in Nigeria's northeast for over a decade. As the Sahel destabilizes and as transnational militant networks deepen their presence in the region, those networks inevitably affect Nigeria's security situation. More fundamentally, though, Nigeria is watching its influence in the region diminish. The AES nations were once part of Nigeria's sphere of influence. They looked to Lagos for economic opportunity and regional leadership. Now they're looking north to Mali and east to Niger, where Traoré's vision is reshaping regional alignments. Nigeria's military is significantly more powerful than Burkina Faso's or Mali's individually, but it's bound by a commitment to democracy and international law in ways the AES militaries are not. Nigeria can't simply expel foreign powers or ignore international opinion. It's more integrated into global systems, more invested in its international reputation, and more constrained by those very commitments that the AES has decided to discard. So Nigeria is faced with a choice. It can try to militarily counter the AES's rising power, which would require a massive commitment and would inevitably draw on outside powers. It can attempt to build its own regional alliance as a counterweight to the AES, or it can attempt to integrate the AES back into a Nigeria-led regional framework. None of these options are appealing, and all of them carry substantial risks. The result is that Nigeria has largely responded with caution and diplomatic engagement, but also with a growing sense of strategic vulnerability in its own region. This dynamic explains why France's expulsion from the Sahel, while symbolically enormous, is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. France lost the Sahel not primarily because Traoré outmaneuvered them, though he did, but because an entire regional order is shifting. And in that shifting order, Nigeria's traditional dominance is being challenged. Western institutions are losing credibility, and new power centers are consolidating. Which brings us to the international dimension, because this is where the full scope of what Traoré has accomplished becomes apparent. For years, Western analysts assumed that Russia's presence in Africa was opportunistic. Moscow was taking advantage of Western missteps to extract resources and build influence. But what's happening in the Sahel suggests something more deliberate. Russia has found a partner in Traoré who is genuinely committed to a vision of non-aligned anti-Western nationalism. This isn't just convenient for Russia, it's valuable. Russia gets access to mineral-rich territory, gets strategic positioning across West Africa, gets a counterweight to NATO expansion, and gets to present itself as a champion of African sovereignty against Western imperialism. The relationship works because it's based on shared interests, not just on exploitation. Similarly, China has invested heavily in infrastructure and military cooperation with AES nations. Turkey has positioned itself as a middle power that can supply military hardware without the political baggage of France or the United States. And the beautiful part of Traoré's strategy, from his perspective, is that he's managed to play all of these powers against each other while maintaining operational independence. He's not simply replacing Western domination with Chinese or Russian domination. He's creating a framework where the Sahel can extract value from multiple powers while committing fully to none of them. This is actually remarkably sophisticated statecraft. Traoré has understood something that many African leaders have struggled to master. In a multipolar world, weakness comes from dependency on a single patron, but strength comes from playing multiple patrons against each other. By ensuring that Russia, China, Turkey, and African partners all have stakes in AES stability and success, He's created a situation where each power has incentives to support him, but none has the leverage to control him completely. But here's what makes this genuinely significant on a global scale. The Sahel is becoming a proving ground for post-Western Africa. Traoré's success in expelling France and constructing alternative partnerships is being watched closely by leaders across the continent. In West Africa, in East Africa, and increasingly even in Southern Africa, leaders are asking themselves, could we do this? Could we reject Western presence, pivot to Asian and Russian partnerships, and actually improve our strategic position? If the answer appears to be yes, if Traore Sahel looks like it's building genuine sovereignty and independence despite Western skepticism, then you could see a broader continental realignment. This doesn't mean the entire continent is about to turn anti-Western or that French influence will collapse everywhere. But it does mean that the post-colonial order in Africa, which was predicated on Western dominance despite formal independence, is being actively challenged. And that challenge is emanating from the Sahel, from a coalition of military governments led by a 39-year-old strategist who understood both his moment and his region. The question that looms over all of this, though, is whether Traoré's vision is actually sustainable. Because here's the brutal reality. The Sahel remains one of the world's most unstable regions. Insurgent violence continues to grow. Humanitarian crises are deepening. The military governments have not solved the fundamental problems that led to their rise: joblessness, marginalization, ethnic tension, religious radicalization. In fact, some of their tactics may be exacerbating those problems. The drone strikes, for instance, have been documented by human rights organizations as causing significant civilian casualties. The heavy-handed security operations have alienated communities that might otherwise be sources of intelligence and support for the military. The rapid militarization, while effective in the short term at projecting state power, hasn't actually reduced insurgent recruitment or prevented terrorist attacks. In some cases, it's emboldened insurgent groups to escalate their tactics and expand their operational capacity. So what you have is a fascinating contradiction. Traore has successfully expelled foreign powers and constructed an alternative geopolitical alignment, but he hasn't actually solved the security crisis that justified the military coup in the first place. The populations of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger remain caught between the security forces and the insurgents, with limited space for normal life, economic activity, or genuine civilian governance. This suggests that Traoré's grand strategic vision, sovereignty, independence, anti-imperialism, may actually be masking a more fundamental problem: the state capacity to address the actual security needs of the population. He's very good at moving pieces on the geopolitical chessboard. He's less clear on how to actually build functioning states that can provide security, justice, and economic opportunity to their citizens. But that may not matter in the short term, because geopolitics doesn't always reward effective governance. Geopolitics rewards power, leverage, and the ability to shape regional and global outcomes. And by those metrics, Traoré has been spectacularly successful. What's truly noteworthy is how quickly this transformation occurred. In 2020, the Sahel was seen as a French preserve, a region where France's military presence was so entrenched that any challenge seemed impossible. By 2024, France has been expelled, a new regional bloc has consolidated power, alternative partnerships have been constructed, and the entire regional balance has shifted. That's extraordinary geopolitical change in a very short period of time. It suggests a few deeper truths about contemporary great power competition. First, Western dominance, particularly French dominance in West Africa, was more fragile than it appeared. It was built on post-colonial economic structures and military presence, not on genuine legitimacy or popular support. Second, there is genuine hunger across Africa for genuine sovereignty and independence, and any leader who can credibly articulate and embody that vision will find substantial support. Third, the multipolar world is actually working. Countries that are clever about managing relationships with multiple powers can extract significant value and maintain independence. Fourth, military governments that present themselves as nationalist and anti-imperialist can maintain substantial popularity even if they fail to deliver on basic security and economic governance. The future of the Sahel remains deeply uncertain. The security crisis could worsen, potentially to the point where the AES coalition fractures under the strain. Economic mismanagement could undermine the alternative partnerships that Traore has constructed. International pressure, particularly from the United States or the African Union, could force some kind of reckoning. Or Traore's vision could consolidate further, creating a genuinely independent Sahel region that reshapes West African geopolitics for a generation. What seems clear, though, is that the old order is gone. France is not coming back to the Sahel in the way it was before. Western dominance is not being restored through military presence or economic coercion. The region is experimenting with an alternative vision of sovereignty and independence, and whatever the ultimate outcomes, that experiment itself is reshaping global geopolitics in ways that we're only beginning to understand. The Sahel's silent revolution has already happened. The question now is not whether it will occur, but what it will ultimately create, and what it means for Africa, for Europe, and for the global balance of power in the decades ahead.